The gray, relentless rain of a Tuesday morning in Chicago hammered against the glass of the bus stop shelter, sounding like a drum roll for a day that Michael already knew was going to be a battle. He pulled the collar of his fraying trench coat tighter around his neck, checking his watch for the third time in a minute. He was going to be late. Again, his ancient sedan had finally given up the ghost that morning, wheezing its last breath of exhaust in the driveway, leaving him stranded and forcing him to navigate the chaotic public transit system during rush hour. Michael closed his eyes for a brief second, the image of his 6-year-old daughter Emily flashing in his mind. She had been coughing all night, her small chest rattling with a persistent cold that he couldn't afford to take her to the doctor for until Friday's paycheck cleared. The weight of the world wasn't just a metaphor for Michael, it was a physical pressure sitting squarely on his shoulders, a constant reminder that as a single father working a low-level data entry job, he was always one flat tire, one sick day, or one missed bus away from total ruin. Before we continue with Michael's journey, if you believe that kindness is a currency that never loses its value, and that good deeds eventually find their way back to us, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share this story. Your support helps us spread hope in a world that often feels too cold. When the number 42 bus finally screeched to a halt in front of him, it was already packed shoulder to shoulder, a tin can of humid, wet wool and exhausted humanity. Michael squeezed himself onto the steps, swiping his transit card with a prayer that the balance hadn't run out. It beeped green, a small mercy. He pushed his way toward the middle of the bus, grabbing a suspended leather strap as the vehicle lurched back into the snarl of traffic. The air inside was thick and stifling, smelling of damp coats and stale coffee. Michael's lower back throbbed, a souvenir from his days working construction before his wife passed away, and he had to find a stable office job to be home for Emily. He scanned the seats. Every single one was taken. Businessmen in sharp suits with noise-canceling headphones buried their faces in tablets. Teenagers laughed loudly at videos on their phones, and tired nurses slept with their heads against the vibrating windows. It was a portrait of urban isolation, everyone together, yet entirely alone in their own bubbles. 3 stops later, the bus hissed to a halt, and a wave of new passengers pushed on. Among them was a woman who looked as though she was carrying the weight of the entire world in her belly. She was heavily pregnant, perhaps 8 months along, her face flushed and beaded with sweat despite the chill outside. She wore a simple, oversized beige coat that looked soaked through at the shoulders, and her blonde hair was plastered to her forehead. She clutched a wet umbrella in one hand and a thick stack of files in the other, looking around desperately for a place to sit. The bus lurched forward violently, and she stumbled, barely catching herself on a metal pole. Michael watched, waiting for someone in the designated priority seating to move. There sat 2 young men in business casual attire, engrossed in a conversation about stock options, and an older man pretending to be asleep. No one looked up. No one moved. The indifference was suffocating. The woman let out a small, shaky breath, shifting her weight, clearly in pain, as the bus hit a pothole that sent a shockwave through the floorboards. Michael didn't hesitate. He didn't think about his aching back, or how tired his legs were from pacing the floor with a sick child all night. He tapped the woman gently on the shoulder. "Ma'am?" he said, his voice raspy from lack of sleep. She turned, startled, her eyes wide and rimmed with exhaustion. "Please, take my seat," Michael said, gesturing to the empty spot he had managed to snag just moments before she boarded. He wasn't sitting, but he had been leaning against a secure partition that took the weight off his legs, a prime spot in a standing room-only bus. He moved aside, creating a path for her. The woman looked at him, stunned, as if he had offered her a diamond instead of a plastic bucket seat. "Are you sure?" she asked, her voice soft and cultured, contrasting with her disheveled appearance. "You look like you've had a long morning yourself." Michael offered a tired, genuine smile. "I'm fine. My legs are younger than they feel. You're carrying precious cargo. Please sit." She sank into the seat with a groan of pure relief, closing her eyes for a moment as her hands rested protectively over her stomach. "Thank you," she whispered, looking up at him with an intensity that caught him off guard. "You have no idea how much my back was killing me. My car, well, let's just say today hasn't gone according to plan." Michael nodded sympathetically, gripping the overhead rail as the bus swayed. "I know the feeling. My car died this morning too. Must be something in the air." They shared a brief, conspiratorial smile, 2 strangers bonded by the universal struggle of a bad Tuesday. For the next 20 minutes, They made small talk. Michael learned she was expecting a boy, and she learned about Emily's cold. He didn't tell her about his financial fears or the fact that he was currently 40 minutes late for a job he hated but desperately needed. He just listened, offering kindness because it was the only thing he had left to give. When the bus approached the financial district, Michael realized with a jolt of panic that he had missed his stop 2 blocks ago because he had been focused on ensuring she didn't fall when the bus took sharp turns. "I have to run," Michael said, hitting the stop request button frantically. "Good luck with the baby. I hope your day gets better." The woman looked at him, her blue eyes sharp and assessing. "What is your name?" she asked suddenly, holding his gaze. "Michael," he called back over his shoulder as the doors hissed open. "Michael Turner." He didn't hear her reply as he bolted out into the rain, sprinting down the wet pavement toward the towering glass monolith of Omnicorp, the massive logistics firm, where he was just a nameless cog in the machine. He arrived at the lobby soaking wet, his cheap shoes squelching on the marble floor. He swiped his badge, the red light flashing briefly before turning green, marking his entry time, 9:45 a.m. He was nearly an hour late. Dread pooled in his stomach like lead. He took the elevator to the 14th floor, the processing hub, a soulless expanse of gray cubicles under humming fluorescent lights. As soon as he rounded the corner to his desk, he saw him, Mr. Vance, the floor manager. Vance was a man who seemed to derive nutrients from the misery of others. He stood by Michael's empty cubicle, tapping a gold pen against a clipboard, a smug, predatory smile on his face. "Mr. Turner," Vance announced, his voice carrying across the silent room so that every other employee could hear. "So nice of you to join us. I assume you were busy negotiating a merger? Or perhaps you were saving the city from a villain." A few co-workers chuckled nervously, keeping their heads down. Michael lowered his head, water dripping from his nose onto the carpet. "My car broke down, sir. I had to take the bus, and there were delays. It won't happen again." Vance stepped closer, invading Michael's personal space. "You're right, Michael. It won't happen again. Because you're done." The words hung in the air, final and brutal. Michael felt the blood drain from his face. "Sir, please," he stammered, his hands shaking. "I have a daughter. She's sick. I need this job. I've been here for 3 years. I've never missed a deadline." Vance shrugged, feigning sympathy. "And you've been late 3 times this month. Corporate is cracking down on inefficiency. We need reliable people, not people who make excuses. Pack your box. Security will escort you out in 10 minutes." Vance turned on his heel and walked away, leaving Michael standing in the wreckage of his life. It was over. Just like that, the health insurance, the rent money, the grocery budget gone. Michael moved like a zombie, grabbing a cardboard box from the supply closet. He packed the framed photo of Emily, his coffee mug, and a stapler. His hands were trembling so hard he almost dropped the picture. He felt tears pricking his eyes, hot and shameful. How would he tell Emily? How would he pay for her medicine? He felt a hand on his shoulder and flinched, expecting security. It was Sarah, the receptionist, looking pitying. "I'm so sorry, Michael," she whispered. "Vance is a monster." Michael just nodded, unable to speak. He put on his wet coat, picked up the box, and began the long walk of shame toward the elevators. He pressed the down button, staring at his reflection in the polished metal doors, a defeated man, soaked and broken. Ding! The elevator doors opened, but it wasn't empty. 2 men in dark suits stepped out, earpieces coiled behind their ears. Security. But they didn't look like the building rent-a-cops. They looked like executive protection. "Michael Turner?" one of them asked. Michael stiffened. "Yes, I'm leaving. I just need to get downstairs." The man shook his head. "We've been instructed to escort you, Mr. Turner, but not to the lobby. To the penthouse." Michael frowned, confusion cutting through his misery. "The penthouse? Why? I've been fired. I don't want any trouble." The guard gestured toward the open elevator. "Miss Sterling requests your presence immediately." "Please, sir." Miss Sterling? The name was a myth in the building. Evelyn Sterling was the owner of Omnicorp, a recluse billionaire who supposedly ran the company from overseas. No one on the 14th floor had ever seen her. Terrified that he was about to be sued for some clerical error he didn't know he made, Michael stepped into the elevator. The ride up was silent and swift, the numbers climbing higher and higher until they hit the button marked PH. The doors opened onto a space that looked more like a luxury apartment than an office. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the rain-swept city. The carpet was thick plush wool, and the air smelled of jasmine and expensive leather. Sitting behind a massive glass desk was a woman. She was typing furiously on a laptop, flanked by two assistants. She looked up as Michael entered, clutching his cardboard box to his chest like a shield. She wasn't wearing a power suit. She was wearing a dry, oversized beige sweater, and she was pregnant. Michael dropped his box. It hit the floor with a dull thud, the stapler clattering inside. It was the woman from the bus. Her hair was dried now, pulled back into an elegant bun, and the exhaustion was replaced by an aura of command. But the blue eyes were the same. "You," Michael gasped. "But you were on the bus. You didn't have a car." Evelyn Sterling smiled, leaning back in her ergonomic chair. "My car had a flat tire 3 blocks from my house," she explained, her voice steady. "My driver called for a backup, but I had a board meeting at 9 a.m. that I absolutely could not miss. I decided to take the bus. It seemed faster than waiting." She stood up slowly, walking around the desk. "I expected to be ignored. I know how the world works when you aren't wearing a designer suit. I watched 6 men look at me and look away. But you stood up." Michael shook his head, trying to process the hallucination in front of him. "I just give you a seat. It's not a big deal." "It is a big deal, Michael," Evelyn said firmly, "because I know you were late. I checked the logs when I got in. I saw your arrival time. And I saw the notification that Mr. Vance terminated your employment 10 minutes ago." She picked up a remote and clicked a button. A screen on the wall flickered to life, showing a security camera feed of the 14th floor. "Mr. Vance," she said into the intercom system that broadcasted to the entire building, "this is Evelyn Sterling. Please report to my office immediately." Minutes later, the elevator dinged and Vance walked in, looking pale and sweaty. He froze when he saw Michael standing there. "Miss Sterling," Vance stuttered, bowing slightly. "I didn't know you were in town. I was just handling a personnel issue with this employee. He was late, and he was late because he was helping me." Evelyn cut him off, her voice slicing through the air like a blade. "While you were likely sipping your espresso in a dry office, this man stood for 40 minutes on a bad back so I wouldn't have to stand. He didn't know who I was. He didn't know I signed his paychecks. He did it because he is a decent human being." She walked closer to Vance. "I've been reviewing the turnover rates in your department, Vance. They are astronomical. I assumed it was the workload. Now I see it's the leadership. You fired a man for showing the exact kind of character we should be promoting." Vance opened his mouth to argue, but Evelyn raised a hand. "You're fired, Mr. Vance. Effective immediately. Security will escort you out. You have 10 minutes." Michael watched in shock as the tables turned. Vance, red-faced and sputtering, was led away by the same guards who had brought Michael up. When the doors closed, silence returned to the room. Evelyn turned to Michael, her expression softening. "I'm sorry you had to go through that scare, Michael, but I needed to see how Vance treated people when he thought no one was watching. Do I have my job back?" Michael asked, his voice small. Evelyn laughed, a warm, genuine sound. "No, you don't." Michael's heart sank again, but she continued quickly. "You don't have that job back. I'm not sending you back to data entry. I need a head of community outreach. Someone who understands what real people go through. Someone who sees the people that everyone else ignores. The position comes with a significant salary increase, a company car so you don't have to worry about breakdowns, and full family health coverage, effective today. I think Emily needs to see a doctor, doesn't she?" Michael fell to his knees. He couldn't help it. The relief was so physical, so overwhelming, that his legs gave out. He buried his face in his hands and wept. He cried for the stress of the last 2 years, for the fear of the morning, and for the unexpected grace of the moment. Evelyn didn't look away awkwardly like the people in the restaurant would have. She waited. She handed him a tissue. "Get up, Michael," she said gently. "We have work to do. But first, go home. Take your daughter to the doctor. Get some sleep. Your new job starts tomorrow." Michael left the building not with a cardboard box of shame, but with a future.